So lovely to be here. I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we're on Whadjuk Noongar land, and also acknowledge Ash for their gorgeous acknowledgement earlier, which really moved me, made my bones tingle, made my organs melt a little bit, and that's, I think, the desired effect of acknowledgements. I'd also like to acknowledge the person with the Borat reference. Can you raise your hand? Oh, that spoke to me almost at the same level. As a side note, I try and put Borat references into every platform and place there's a bio available. I haven't put on my LinkedIn yet, but I'll get there. And my favourite quote from that movie is that his wife is strong on plough. You know that one? Anyway, I'm strong on plough as well. So that's why I'm here today. That's why Layla actually reached out. And since this is an unconference, we are going to bring you an unkeynote. So instead of pacing up and down and delivering you beautiful prose, I think we're pretty much going to run this like a live podcast recording where we just shoot the shit and talk about some stuff that hopefully you enjoy, but we're probably just going to get weird for most of it. And it's probably worth knowing who you're about to get weird with. And so this is Matt. I'm a big, yes, round of applause. That's Matt there. I look like that if I haven't gone to the salon with the mustache, but I did for that photo. I'm a huge fan of Matt Berry, and this whole thing was really aroused to interview him about some really important work he's been doing for the past century, it feels like. And that was the bane of his existence for a while with his masters. And every time he spoke about it, I was like, can we get this out there? Can we talk to people about it? And then this came up and I was like, hey, Matt, let's talk about transition design. So I'm really delighted to be alongside Matt today, and can't wait for you to hear all this juicy shit. Thanks, you got a lecture.
I got this one. We'll see how we go with this one. My confession, we decided to surprise each other with our intros of each other. And my confession is that I have no idea what Lily actually does for a day job. It's financy, I think. She's definitely told me, she's not a very good friend. But I think what I do know about Lily and what made me say yes to this talk is that she's the sort of person who knows everyone, and if there's something cool going on in Perth, you dig a little bit under the surface, that Lily is probably there behind it, making things happen in the background. She's one of those people that is just sort of supporting and selfless and willing to sort of put her time into a whole bunch of very cool things. So yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
That was really cute. Thank you, Matt. I think I work in finance. I'm not sure. Report back later. We should start this off in a particular way, given the title of the talk. But we wanted to sort of start on a positive note and explore between us, you know, what living in a better world looks like to us. And Matt, can you give us a little bit of a rundown of the things you've attached? So we collaborated on this mood board together and added some things that we really wanted in this new world we're creating, because this one has got to go, basically. And so, Matt, give us what's your jam here? What are you looking forward to?
Look, there's a lot of things I'm looking forward to. The corrosive wine, the food, we'll get you to talk a little bit about what that is in the bottom right-hand corner in a second. Bookstores, just that bit at the beach where like the sun's going down and it's dusky, and like watching surfers from afar. I'm not a surfer myself, but loving that shit. I think there's a lot of things, that I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, I wanted to start, rather than with the end of the world stuff, start with some of the nice things that we want to see instead. I'd love to hear about what's happening in the bottom right-hand corner, and then this lady and her dog. That feels important.
Yeah, so about the equivalent of like how important Borat is to me is this reel from Instagram of this old woman. I don't know if anyone's seen it. You're laughing, so I assume you have. Where there's a whole bunch of people dancing. It looks like kind of a Blue Zone-esque place. It's probably like Sardinia or something. And she's just dancing with this dog, like by herself, you know? And when I saw that, I just thought, that's where I want to be and that's how I want to live. That's why she's on there. And then in the bottom corner, you see what might look like mozzarella, but it's labneh. And it's there because Layla actually told me a story about how her dad yells, "From the hall," when people go to grab labneh that he makes. And I felt like that was a metaphor for the kind of collectivism I want to live in. So my world is full of that shit, and also ladies dancing with dogs, and a set of decks so that we have like a soundtrack for this new world. I don't know what that music would be, but I assume it's kind of loungy, kind of beautiful and immersive. So that's a bit about, really what we want to create. Now, I would like to just note, Matt, what is the peach about, please?
The peach is about many things, really. It's about fresh seasonal fruit, which is always important and a big part of a good life. But it is also about butts. I think one of the really important things that we wanted to capture here is that when we're looking at a good life and the sort of visioning that we do, often it gets to be this sort of slightly clean and, nicely presented vision of a sustainable future. And we've got our sort of community gardens and our cyclable streets in there. But also we want there to be dancing, and we want there to be pleasure, and we want there to be sex, and we want all these kinds of things in our sort of good life that we imagine for ourselves. So it's not just that sort of, not just the clean version of a sustainable future. We want some joy and some pleasure in there as well.
Some juice. Beautiful. I really enjoyed this process, and I feel like we could end the talk here, and that would be it. And that would be a really good use of time. But before we jump into more dark and serious and mysterious stuff, I want you to take a minute and talk amongst yourselves and think about, or note down in your brain or on the phone or on a notepad, what are 3 things that would be on your mood board? And we'll come back to you in 60 seconds. Go for it.
Not gonna lie to you, we are drawing a bit of a long bow in calling this a UX talk, but this is our best attempt to draw the link for you. All right, so as users of this thing called the world, we feel like we're running into a few UX issues, right? There's a few things going on that are not quite how we would expect them to be. And so in a talk about the end of the world, we do need to do a little bit of the doom and gloom stuff, but we'll try and keep it super quick. The first thing that our mind jumps to, of course, is this climate crisis that's bearing down on us. And so we know that we've got these ever-rising emissions. We know that we've got, you look out the door or in the news and there's more and more crises and disasters happening. And unfortunately, it's not just the sort of the carbon and the climate crisis that is the problem. The climate boundaries are one of 9 sets of planetary boundaries that we need to be staying within to sort of maintain a safe world to be living in. And unfortunately, we are very confident, in fact, sure, that we've gone past 6, and we're pretty sure that we might be heading past the 7th pretty soon as well. So that's, I think, nearly an 80% grade, Lily, for fucking up the planet.
That's a distinction, is it not? It's a good grade.
Job. And then that's all the sort of ecological stuff. But then you look around as well, and there's all of these social crises that are sort of piling up on top of each other as well. You've got gendered violence, cost of living, housing, mental health, biodiversity, and it's getting to the point where we're actually starting to have to invent all of these new prefixes for the word crisis. We've got the poly crisis because there are so many of them at once. We've got the perma crisis because it seems to be this permanent state we're in. And the meta crisis we'll maybe get into a little bit with what's causing these things. This is, for the Princess Bride fans out there, a very low-quality homemade meme to give you a sense of what to expect from the rest of the keynote. But what we're finding, and you should sort of bring this back to this UX angle, is that as users of this thing called the world, we're not getting the results that we sort of expect to get, right? We seem to, we have this expectation that the world will produce relative stability. There might be a crisis every now and again, but then we'll sort of head back into a period of stability. We have this expectation that there'll be this ongoing progress and that things will be sort of slowly but surely getting better over time. But actually what we're seeing right now is that more and more young people don't believe that their lives are going to be better than their parents' lives were. And we're actually not seeing that sort of stability and progress that the world's supposed to produce for us, which to me feels like the biggest issue that all designers need to be sort of focusing our attention on right now.
Look, acknowledge all that, but it's a bit too much depresso in the espresso for me. I think we need to workshop some options that are available to us as designers and see what resonates and which one we should maybe proceed with. You take away this first one because I know it's your favourite variation.
We love the bunkers. So making bunkers great again. This is sort of option 1, and this is the option where we as designers just accept that collapse is happening, right? Right? It's happening. There's nothing much we can do about it. And we're just going to make sure that we can design the very best bunkers. I wish I could do a Trump impression, but I won't try that. But we know that there is this sort of, there's the off-grid sort of prepper community that are sort of embracing this option. But you actually see a sort of shadow version of this in lots of public policy and public conversation as well, where people are starting to have these conversations about, don't even worry about mitigation, we just need to focus on adaptation, we just need to focus on sort of adapting the worlds that we have. And we know that this option starts to tend to become pretty insular, right? You start to be designing for protecting your in-group, your family, your community, and the rest be damned. And so for me personally, I think there's going to be a lot of work for designers to do in adapting to the sort of climate impacts that we're going to be facing and the social crises we're already facing. But hopefully we can do a little bit better than just accepting collapse and hiding ourselves away in a really, really well-designed bunker.
Yeah, and this one has this green roof, which I kind of love. But conceptually not good, right? I'm going to pitch the second one, which is saving the world. And who saves the world in this example? Yeah. This one is where we leave it to tech bros to save us. And it's really saving us as a species and just forgetting about everything else. So it's really grounded in a worldview that sees us as the dominant species that dominates over everything else, and we'll just green tech our way through it or green growth our way through it. The real pickle with this is that, apart from the externalities that are being hidden, is that, ironically, it's going to result in a lot less green on the planet itself. So not super fantastic. And we've got no beef with green technologies. We totally need them, but it's the worldview in which you implement them from. And if you do it without reforming the systems that we live within, that could be a huge pickle as well. And we might end up with this kind of mishmash of like high-tech green zones and then just like complete death and devastation on the other side. Which doesn't seem like a good option, but nonetheless, that was my pitch to you for it. Matt, I know that you, thankfully, have a few ideas about innovating on this worldview piece and how we might shift that in how we collectively innovate on it. So let us know.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the sort of save the world option, because on the face of it, it sounds pretty good, right? It'd be quite nice if we could save the world. But I think this diagram is sort of, if you remember nothing else from our talk, this is sort of the core idea that we want you to come away with. And it's this idea that the social and ecological outcomes that we're getting, currently the crises and inequities that we're seeing piling up everywhere, are the results of these economic and political systems that are happening below the surface, right? And it's the same set that are producing these different kinds of crises, even if different people are sort of working on them and addressing them in different ways. Those systems, in turn, are sort of built on a set of worldviews, a set of stories that we have about what these systems are supposed to be for, what the world is supposed to be like. And the worldviews that we're building on at the moment are these stories about separation and competition, extraction and expansion, hierarchy and control. And so those are the worldviews that are shaping the kinds of systems that we design and therefore shaping the kinds of outcomes that we're getting. This is a bit of a slightly delicate point to make, and so I want to sort of read a little piece I've written before to sort of expand a little bit on this one. But it's talking about this idea that when we're talking about the end of the world and talking about saving the world, we're talking about this particular world that we've built ourselves. It's built on these kinds of stories. There's lots of names for it. It might be called capitalism, it might be called modernity. It's been called neoliberalism around here lately. But these kinds of stories are shaping a particular kind of world that actually might not be able to be saved and might not be worth saving. And so I'm going to sort of read a quick piece here, which is that growth and development for some people in some places has been fueled by what's taken, often violently, from others and from elsewhere. Taken from the majority world, the marginalized and the working class on the one hand, and taken from the natural world and the future itself on the other. In the process, the very model of what progress is supposed to look like has been exported by the minority and imposed on the majority world, denying lots of communities the freedom to define and pursue the lives that they want to live. And even the winners in all of this, looking at most of the room here, are unhealthy and unhappy, disconnected from ourselves and each other and the world around us. So this is sort of it's not a bug, it's a feature taken to a society scale, right? The kinds of issues that we're seeing are not something that we can just change those systems at that level of the economic and political systems and expect to get different kinds of outcomes. They're actually an inevitable result of the worldviews that we keep trying to build these systems on. And so we might need to think about a different way of approaching this that actually starts to get down to that deeper worldview level.
That was gorgeous. Thank you. And it sounds like you're sort of teasing us with what a potential third option could be. Is that what you're doing? I love that you've brought that with you. That's so coincidental. Can you talk us through what you're thinking if we're not doing the bunkers or the tech bro saving the world? Again, if you want to vote for that, you can. We'll get a form going later. Talk us through what this third option could look like and why we should engage with it as designers.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into it in a little bit more depth, but very quickly, we're looking at building safe, just and joyful new worlds to take this one's place. And so when we're talking about designing for the end of the world, it sounds like a big sort of disaster. Actually, it's kind of a good thing. If the world that we're working with, the world that we're living in is not been working for us, let's actually design that out and design the new worlds, plural, that might take its place. And we need to then think about what kind of worlds is it? What kind of worldviews do we want to be building these new systems from, these new worlds from, in order that we can get the better outcomes that we're hoping for?
So worldview, my wife, is that okay? Expecting that to be a worldview? I just want to get Borat in there as much as I can. Now, I don't know if anyone sees this regularly. I do, and I resonate with it so strongly because I feel like this all the time. And as we're talking about this third option where we're going to try and adopt this worldview or, I guess, see how that goes and design something around it, what does that really mean and how do we engage with this option? What do we need to do?
Yeah, so, I mean, we can return to this diagram and sort of look at what the sort of theory of change is for this kind of way of designing and this way of approaching design for the end of the world. And the core idea here is that we need new economic and political systems designed from different worldviews, some of them new and some of them sort of ancient, many of them that have been around for tens of thousands of years in this place where we are now, in order to get the better social and ecological outcomes that we want to achieve. But I feel like this is still sort of at an abstract level. And so one of the really helpful things that we can do is tell a bit of a story about what this looks like as sort of design work in the world. And this is where I'm going to give you a chance in a minute to talk a little bit about some of what you've been up to.
Oh, well, first let's look at what we mean by safe, just and joyful, just as a little aside. Safe is really that we're within those planetary boundaries that we're quite dramatically transgressing, but we can bring them back. It's kind of bouncy like that, and we could keep them in that safe zone. So that's safety, really, and we're resilient, and our climate system, our Earth system is resilient to support not only our life, but all life on Earth. It's just, this is a really key piece that when the planetary boundaries were being formed, it didn't account for this kind of just space. So yes, this is the boundary for, say, some sort of chemical flow, but when you account for social indicators and everyone having access to that thing, the boundary actually shifts. So I think one good example of that is the 1.5 degree limit. When you sort of add a layer of being able to provide for everyone, it's actually 1 degree, which is super crazy. But super possible if we make some of these transformations as quickly as we can. But yeah, the just piece is really about everyone being accounted for and everyone's needs being met. And that's everyone, not particular cohorts and or subsections of the society, but everyone truly. And then the last bit Matt added in, which was quite excellent, around it needing to be joyful, full of meaning, connection, pleasure. It's got to be fun. Oh, if it's not fun, no one's going to do it. So that brings us to how we might go about building these safe, just and joyful systems. And one that I'm going to talk to is one that I have a little bit of experience in on the ground here in Perth, or in Fremantle specifically, where I live. And it really is, it's about bread. It's about bread, everybody. And bread is everything, and it brings us together. No, we desperately need to reform these systems really from the ground up. And what's been happening across Australia the last sort of few years, definitely since 2019 or pre-pandemic, is this community independent movement. It's everyday people, punters, getting together and trying to kind of transform politics. And there's lots of terms that are bandied about that you might be familiar with: deliberative democracy, participatory democracy. There's even liquid democracy. And that's where you kind of delegate your vote to people that are smarter than you, which I kind of am into. And it reminds me a lot of that TV show with Alex Mack where she like floats or she like melts into the ground and she goes under doors and stuff. Anyway, it's called lots of things, but at the root of it all is people participating in political decision making. Now, you can sub out political for any word you want, but ultimately it's about people having a say in the shit that they care about. And it's really underpinned and supported by groups all around the country. There's heaps of them that sort of form and they coalesce quite organically, and then they have lots of fun, like you can see down there. And it's really not about a candidate or about a political leader specifically. It's really actually about people connecting and sharing. And one really good example of that is what's often called kitchen table conversations, but you can call it whatever you want. You could call it a UX conversation. You do whatever you like. But really it's people coming around a place where they can gather. That could be their living room, could be a park, it could be their kitchen table if they've got one and they have that privilege. I don't have a kitchen table. And just discussing the things that matter to them in a facilitated way. So everyone in here would have probably either been part of a session or run a session like this, where you're just facilitating respectful and meaningful dialogue. And weirdly, as simple and as kind of basic as this sounds, it's sort of can be credited with transforming our political system over the last few years. It's even catching the attention of people overseas. Russell Crowe was on the Joe Rogan podcast, of all things, talking about it. So it's really kind of left the building, so to speak, and people are getting wind of it. And it's been a real privilege to be part of it. We've got a group in Fremantle trying to do some of this stuff and just getting people to participate in their democracy. And this is one tiny little example of how you can really engage in these systems in just ways that you find fun and meaningful. I like gathering with people, breaking bread, meeting up, talking, shooting the shit like we're doing right now. And it's, yeah, there's so many examples that you can think of, whether it's political systems, our food system, all systems there that are sort of ripe for us to engage with in the ways that, you know, we feel are meaningful.
And what I really love about that example is that it's not just like you could have started another political party and run it on the same kinds of worldviews, the same kinds of competitive spirit of politics. But instead of a new party to sort of push the world that you want to look at, it's actually like, how do we build this from the ground up from a really different set of assumptions, a really different set of worldviews and values? And then what would that look like? What would it look like to sort of do politics differently?
Yeah, and it's almost like an upgrade. So a lot of this, the terminology and the things that we're looking at, it kind of looks like we have to tear all these systems down and, you know, burn it all and then move on. There's room here to retrofit and upgrade, and these are really small ways that this is already happening around the country. And I love that idea of upgrading democracy rather than lighting it on fire and seeing what else could sort of work. So yeah, it's really beautiful. And this is just a reminder, again, great memes, a key to any good presentation. This is more of a reminder for everyone that it doesn't need to be super hard and complex, and you don't need to have it all worked out. You don't need to have particular skills. You happen to have the bloody perfect skills for engaging this work. Anyone who works in design has all of that, but it's really joyful and it really does move you once you start to engage in it. So I would just encourage you, no matter what system it is, whether it's food systems, maybe you look on Buy Nothing groups and Marketplace and Gumtree, that's you already engaging in kind of transforming our stuff economy and meaning that we consume and use less. And this is just one other way you can do that. So I encourage you to dive into it and see what happens and let it rip, basically.
One of my favourite things that Lily says to me often is that our economic and political system is just a bunch of decisions that we've made about how we live our lives together. They're things that have been designed. And so if they've been designed, as you guys know, we can design them differently. That's the core of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. And conscious that we need to pull this back to UX. At some point, we may never, but just in case we should. I think this is kind of our olive branch to the work that you do and how you might be able to engage in this. And this was really what moved me quite a lot about Matt's work in transition design, was these sort of invitations he's going to take you through that invite you into this work in ways that you might be more familiar with and understand and feel connected to. So Matt, take it away. What are we going to do about this?
There's a range of different things. But yeah, I spoke to around 50 designers in a project that was supposed to be a 6-month master's project and ended up taking the last sort of 2.5 years-ish, as Lily pointed to. But there are some really key things that came out of that around the kinds of things that we can do to try and do this kind of design work that's actually getting to that level of purpose and worldviews, not just trying to redesign the same kind of systems. The first one is around creating spaces and processes to be, think, and act together. That can be around a kitchen table, or it can be in an auditorium at a conference with 200 people together. So it's any kind of space where you get together and actually just share ideas and try and work out how we can do some of this work together, because sort of a lot of the time people are wanting to do this kind of work but feeling super isolated. So creating those spaces, and the little asterisk there is the spaces might already exist, and so going and participating and being a sort of good guest in those spaces is just as valuable and maybe more so. The second one's around revealing the status quo and stepping beyond it with bold, positive visions. So we need to be aware of the kind of worldviews that are steering the ship right now if we're going to be able to sort of rewrite those and build from different worldviews. So there's a reckoning piece here, really understanding like how we got ourselves in this mess, and really sort of like letting that hit you at an emotional level, I think is part of this. But then also there's a really beautiful piece, and this is why we started with this sort of visioning of the good life, is thinking about how do we, rather than just thinking about like, how do we get this to a place where it's okay? How do we get this to a place that's acceptable? How do we solve problems? Actually, let's be really bold and ambitious and think about the worlds that we really want. Like, what do you actually want this system to look like in your ideal world? And you might not be able to get there tomorrow, but you can start taking steps towards it instead of steps in the wrong direction. The third piece is around directing diverse efforts towards learning our way forward together. So you don't have to do all this on your own. There's already people who are trying to work in whatever system it is that you're working in, who are doing amazing work, and that's fantastic. But what we need is to be sort of directing those and sort of coordinating those efforts together. We want to be talking to each other and working out, all right, if you do that, then that actually opens up a space for me to do this thing. Or if I do this, I'll create this data that can inform your thing. And trying to work out how you can find those sort of synergies to be getting better outcomes together.
10 points from Gryffindor. That's not okay. No.
And directing that in a way that's all about experiments and learning our way forward as well. You don't have to be just focused on outcomes. It's all about try something. If it didn't work, share that information and sort of be learning your way forward together. There's 5 of them. We're nearly there. The fourth invitation, building strategies to transform or displace the status quo. Lily spoke about how it's not all about burning it down, but it's not all about that as well.
Definitely keep your matches. Yeah.
So there's a piece around transforming the status quo. We need to build the new worlds that we want from sort of stolen pieces of the old world. And so I was thinking about how we can take the systems that already exist and start to sort of use those pieces and transform them in different ways. But there's also sometimes a call to actually build pockets of the future that you want in the now and actually start to demonstrate what it could be and what it could look like, and then try to use that to displace the status quo. Start to draw people to your camp, and people might abandon this old world that we need to be designing out. And lastly, this, as I said, is not going to happen overnight. You need to plan to be in this work for the long haul. And that means a couple of things. There's a strategic piece to it, which is about that sort of long-term planning. You know, if we've got a 20-year goal for what we want our food system, our housing system, our political system to look like, what are we going to do in the next 6 months that's going to open up the next step for the next year, for the next... And so keeping on thinking about those stages that we're going to build in. But also... There's people doing this work, right? And so this is like, it ties back to the piece around the first invitation about creating spaces, but we need to, in those spaces, be caring for ourselves and be caring for each other, and be bringing a bit of that element of pleasure and joy into the work as well to make sure that we're able to keep doing this in the long term.
Yeah, just bring Layla's dad's Labney and everything will be fine. And say, from the hole. Am I doing the accent right? Oh, so great. Look, there was a lot of juicy, beautiful call to actions there. And I think returning to this slide and what the vision for what we're trying to build, or the world that we kind of want to occupy, is a good way to not, one, end on a depressing note, and two, remind ourselves of what that looks like for you, and how you can help that inform the work that you do, whether it's in the workplace or out of it. Because a lot of what all of these shit systems that are kind of screwing us over are based upon are stories, and they're things that we've said someone said to someone one day and was like, that's what the economy is. And you're like, cool, okay. And then the economy happens and that's what we have now. So there's no reason you can't rewrite those stories or slightly modify them or put a comma where there wasn't one before. It's really an invitation to engage in that thought process and then share that with someone, because often when you share that with someone else, which is I think why that kitchen table conversation model works so well, someone else goes, oh yeah, why do we do it that way? And why are we doing this bad shit to the planet? And that can really lead to very transformative things, which sounds like it doesn't, but it really does. Yeah.
I think the other piece is, like, we invited you to talk about, like, with the person next to you about what would be on your mood board for the sort of good life. I can bet that it probably wasn't 3 jet skis and a steak dinner every night and a salary that just keeps growing and growing and growing. You know, we don't dream of economic growth. Actually, when we pay attention to ourselves and we pay attention to the kind of desires that we have, those desires can be a kind of compass for the worlds that we want to build in the future to replace this one, right? And so actually, when you think about the good life, you're thinking about joy and connection and meaning and purpose and pleasure and all of these kinds of things. And if we start to build from those rather than building from this sort of this other worldview that we've talked about already, that's going to sort of guide us towards the kind of work that we want to do.
So like all good designers, we need to leave you with a project to do. And this is the design brief for building this new world. The client is not super fussy necessarily, but a little bit fickle and needs to be taken with care and spoken to with a different kind of tone. We invite you to think about the mood board that you started to ponder over and design this new world and set of systems based on this different worldview, based on your beautiful mood board, that's going to enable us to live a more safe, just and joyful life. And definitely do it ASAP. And budget is limitless. It's unlimited. So just go nuts.
So we talked about the end of the world in the title of this talk. So I want to finish with this quote around the end of the world as we know it is not the end of the world, full stop, right? We can design out this world that's based on a whole set of stories that actually aren't serving us. We can start to try and design new worlds, plural, that will replace it and that are safe, just, and joyful for all of us. Lily, you had a little story that you can tell about this that I wanted to sort of...
Yes, the cancer story, yes. Let's talk about cancer, woo! No, I think it's just the point around this quote articulates so beautifully, is that there's quite a lot of wisdom and clarity that comes with being at the end of something. Like, you've accumulated all this wisdom and knowledge about, like, the things you like and you don't like and what visions you have for the future. And it reminded me of a story that my partner who works in cancer care told me about when I asked him sort of which patients are the most difficult, which is a horrible question to ask, but, you know, designer shit. What's the persona like? And he mentioned that it was palliative patients or people who have a terminal diagnosis. And I went, what? And he said, well, they just give no fucks, basically, and have gotten to a point where many things that are more menial and perhaps meaningless, they don't matter to them, and they really just focus on the time they have left and what they're going to do with that time. And I think that it serves as a brilliant reminder that it might be worthwhile incorporating some of that into our own thinking about these new worlds, and that the most difficult patients were those who had, like, little cancers that were not terminal. They complain about appointment times and, you know, are not bad customers. They have cancer, right? But, you know, they're a bit more difficult. So moral of the story is don't wait for a terminal cancer diagnosis to start thinking about how you're going to use the time that you have left in the most safe, just and joyful way. Yeah. That brings us to a close. Thank you, Matt.